Well then, it's about that time again. Things aren't looking good. I said it was going to get bad before. Yeah, I was right. Initially I thought I was wrong. Things seem to be going back to normal, going back on even keel, but no, it would appear that things are going downhill rapidly. When I made the last video on a similar subject, I talked about economic cascade failure, and we are still having massive economic issues and significant supply chain issues, but it's not apocalyptic. Like there have been shortages of things, but ultimately, it's not like you go to the shops and there's no food for you to buy. It's like maybe you couldn't get the particular thing you want or whatever, but it's not like we're at a famine or anything. But that's not the issue we're facing now. At least not yet. The issue we're facing right now is an energy crisis. And winter is coming. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what happens to the energy demand when the temperatures start going from a fairly mild, comfortable 13 Celsius like it is now to below freezing. So, why is this happening? Well, it's happening for a bunch of different reasons. So, first of all, gasoline and diesel has got very expensive. The reason for this one is mostly down to the Americans. Now, everyone wants to blame Russia for this. This really has very little to do with Russia, because Russia, while it does produce a fair bit of oil, there are lots of countries that produce a fair bit of oil, but the number one oil producing country in the world, it's not Saudi Arabia. Believe it or not, it's actually not Saudi Arabia. Everyone thinks it is, but it's not. It is America. And their idiot-in-chief decided to massively ramp down American oil production because climate change or some bullshit like that. So that's why gasoline and diesel is expensive right now. The other thing to keep in mind is that gasoline and diesel are bought and sold on the international market. Oil is also bought on the international market. Oil is sometimes moved through pipelines, but mainly it's moved through tankers. It's easy to do that, because oil is a liquid. Now, on the other hand, the energy crisis that we're facing in Europe is not so much related to oil, but natural gas. Natural gas has been used for a very long time in a lot of applications. Over half of houses in the UK and probably in most European countries use natural gas for heating. And on top of that, it is the main fossil fuel we use for the generation of electrical power. So why is that? Well, it's for a number of reasons. First of all, we used to use a lot of oil and coal to generate power. However, as fossil fuels go, those have the absolute worst emissions. So we decided, decades ago, that in order to clean up, the environment, reduce pollution, CO2 emissions, that sort of thing, the fossil fuel we should use should be natural gas. Now, natural gas, on the other hand, is not transported by container ships. It's transported through pipelines. It's pretty much moved by pipeline from the source where it is drilled to wherever it is consumed. And the source of most of Europe's natural gas is Russia. Now, Russia has been embargoed in various ways. We've cut down enormously on the amount of gas that we were exporting from Russia. However, two big developments have just happened, or two things just about. One thing has already happened and another thing is about to happen that's about to make the situation worse. First of all, winter is coming, so our use of natural gas every winter goes up a lot, and the supplies are already very restricted, very expensive. And on top of that, someone has just blown up the Nord Stream pipeline going from Russia to Germany. Now, The media is trying to say that the Russians blew up their own pipeline. That makes literally zero fucking sense. Why on earth would anyone ever do that? The answer is they wouldn't. It was probably the fucking Americans. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, the situation looking very bad in Germany. The situation looking bad here, but it's looking even worse in Germany. So the problem with Germany is Germany basically has no oil reserves. They have no natural gas reserves. You know, they have been running most of their grid off natural gas for decades. You know, nearly all of which comes from Russia, or most of which comes from Russia. And on top of that, Germany has been shutting down their nuclear power stations since 2011. Not a good move. The other thing as well with Germany is Germany doesn't really have a lot of renewable power. It's not very suitable for renewable power because it's not very sunny and it's not very windy. They've tried very hard to do the whole renewable energy thing, but it only makes up 4% of their grid. So we're also in a bad situation. It's potentially looking like we could have blackouts over the winter. But this is pretty bad. And there are a lot of problems. So, for example, if we have severe blackouts, what do you think happens to like a densely populated place like London if none of the traffic lights work? For example, it's going to become just gridlocked straight away, and there's going to be accidents all the time, constantly. And the big issue, of course, is how we cook our food, how we stay warm. You know, how will we see at night, all that sort of thing. Which is what I want to talk about today. Yeah, you need to have a contingency plan in place because otherwise there is a very real risk of freezing to death over the winter. Now the good news is winters here are fairly mild. It doesn't really go much below about -4, -5, -6 Celsius. Other places in Europe, obviously, it will be harder to deal with. They're colder. So, for example, in parts of Germany and Austria, I've been told it can get lower than 15 Celsius. However, we're not going to be so bad, but this could still be a potentially dangerous situation if you don't prepare for it adequately. So, for example, if you don't really work outdoors, maybe you don't even have a winter coat because you just have a jumper, and you just have jumpers, that's all you have, or your hoodies, and you only go from like your house to your car and your car to your office. That's really not a good situation to be in. You know, ask yourself tomorrow, if the power went off, if the heating went off, could I survive? It's not even a matter of just being comfortable. It's a matter of survival. So this is how you deal with this and how you prepare for it. Start preparing now, because there's no point in preparing when disaster strikes. By the time the disaster strikes, it's already too late because everyone else has the same idea who did prepare, and they go out and panic buy everything, and you can't get any of the things you need. So if we do have rolling blackouts, gas shortages to the point that we can't have electricity or our homes or heat them, this is what you need. First of all, you need a plentiful supply of warm clothing. Think thermal underpants and shirts, thick winter coats, that sort of thing. Remember, layering as well. Layers will keep you warm because it traps air between the different layers of clothing, which acts as an insulator. So, believe it or not, 6 thin t-shirts is actually better than a jumper keeping you warm. This is basic survival stuff. Learn it. The next up, food. Make sure that you have food because if blackout hits, a lot of people, most of their food will be perishable food. They will then all go out and panic buy at once, meaning that you'll have a hard time getting food. So make sure that you have adequate stockpiles of food, and not perishable food here, okay? Perishable food is no good in a blackout. You know, if you don't have electricity to keep your food cold, it will spoil. You know, make sure that you have a decent supply of non-perishable food, preferably with a long shelf life. Think, you know, powdered goods, canned goods, that sort of thing. You know, in fact, you know, tin soup is a really good one. It basically just requires heat to make, and it lasts years at a time.
Average speed zone.
You know, if you just want cheap stuff, yeah, stuff like instant mashed potatoes, your rice, beans, keeps for a very long time, and it's cheap. So make sure you have plenty of food. In addition to this, you want to make sure that you have at least some water on hand, because remember, if things get bad enough that we have a severe energy shortage, there may not even be enough energy to run water pumps, which means that water may not actually come out of your taps. So don't count on there always being water out your taps, because if a blackout if energy shortage is severe enough, it will disrupt the water supply. So that's an easy one. Just get cheap containers, fill them with water. You don't even need to go out and buy anything especially. You can literally just use reuse plastic bottles that bottled water and soft drinks come in. That works absolutely fine. You don't need to necessarily go and spend loads and loads of money on like high-end, survival, military grade shit, because you just don't. So yeah, that's water cover, that's food cover. The next one, that's clothing covered as well. The next one, heat. Make sure that you have a way to stay warm. If we don't have blackouts and it's just an issue of energy being very expensive, yeah, get yourself some electric blankets. Those are great. They cost very little to run because you're not generating anywhere near as much heat, but you're heating yourself instead of the whole room. However, they will not work in a blackout. They're electric. For a source of heat, there are different things you can do. If you don't have hot water bottles, that's not a bad way to go. If you're very cold, boil some water, fill up a hot water bottle, snuggle up in bed with it, and yeah, that'll keep you warm. Not only that, but there's a very strong element of psychological comfort, with that. And when it comes to any kind of, situation like this, when times are tough, keeping your morale and good spirits is very important. Another thing I would recommend, and I intend to do this very soon, is make sure that you have a way to burn firewood, and make sure that you have at least a decent amount of firewood just in case. It's a very good source of heat, and in many cases, depending on the laws of your country, you can go and get it for free even. In this country, for example, most forests are public property, and you can absolutely go in there, with a chainsaw, find a dead tree that's, fallen down and, chop it up, take it home. Yeah, you can do that over here. If you have a wood burning stove, that's a possibility for you to put into your house. I would highly recommend that. If not, then the fire pit outside is a good way to stay warm. Obviously though, you can't really sleep outside, next to a fire, and on top of that, you're going to take more wood to keep you warm outside than inside. If you have a fireplace, then that is a great option. If you have a wood burning fireplace, I highly recommend making sure you know how to use that. One thing though, if you have a wood burning fireplace in your house and you've never used it before, please go and get a chimney sweep to inspect your chimney, make sure it's clean, it's not blocked, because if your chimney is blocked, you are going to be putting lethal amounts of carbon monoxide into your house. In fact, if you're going to use any kind of fuel indoors, anything at all that isn't just electricity, then please, for the love of God, buy yourself not only a smoke alarm but also a carbon monoxide alarm. It may save your life. But yeah, we get back to the point. That's another element of survival. You need food. You need food, water, heat, and shelter. Depending on the severity of the blackout, it may be that it could be that everything goes down in your area. It could be the power is restricted just to essential services like transportation, traffic control systems, mobile phones, and the telecommunications networks, water pumping stations, sewage treatment plants, but power gets shut off, to houses. That could be the case. And if we do get blackouts, it's the most likely scenario. Considering this, you want to make sure that you have a way to charge your devices without the mains. You can use your car for this. However, do not use your car to charge things without the engine running. You will deplete the battery. Depending on what the thing is you're charging, you can deplete the battery very quickly and your vehicle won't be able to start. But that is, if you have a car, that's the most obvious way to charge your device, like your phone, for example, in a blackout. If you don't have a car, even if you do, because it's just a much more efficient way of doing things that isn't going to waste loads of fuel, get yourself a battery bank. They're not expensive. You can buy them all over the place, keeping in mind these things are only really good for charging USB devices. Now, if you really want to go all out, you can get yourself a generator. They come in two types basically. Fossil fuel generators that burn LPG, diesel or petrol, and solar generators. Solar generators are obviously great because they don't require fuel. You just have to have some solar panels for them, and you won't have to keep replacing fuel and spending more money on them. However, the drawbacks of them are they're expensive, and you can only get so much energy from them, so you have to use it very sparingly. A conventional generator that runs on, say, gasoline or diesel, on the other hand, is cheaper to buy in the first place, but it requires fuel, it requires maintenance, and it's loud, and they are not cheap to run, especially with our fuel prices. But that is a route you can go down if you want to have, some creature comforts, if you want to have your electric light. Keep in mind though that, a generator will not just necessarily power everything in your house. They only, depending on what you buy, they'll have, only a certain amount of wattage, and obviously the bigger the generator is, the more wattage it can kick out, the more fuel it'll use. So keep that in mind. A generator will say how many watts it is, all your appliances will say how many watts they are, and it can vary massively. So for example, a flat screen television uses approximately 40 watts, and a kettle uses 700 to 1,000. But yeah, the main thing is just to make sure you have the basic provisions in place to be warm, fed, and hydrated. Everything else is something of a luxury. But yeah, make sure that you're prepared for blackouts, for there to be no gas, because it's a very real possibility. And if that does happen and you're not prepared for it, winter is going to be absolutely brutal. The other thing you want to keep in mind as well, be very careful with candles, because that happens a lot when there's a blackout. Everyone goes and lights candles. Do not leave candles lit and unattended in a room. That is how you get a fire, and that does happen during many blackouts. There was the very big one in New York in the 80s, and thousands of people managed to set their homes on fire. To be honest, there's little need for candles these days. LED lights are very small, very cheap, and can run for very, very, very long periods of time on very little power. So I recommend that as well. That's another one as well. Make sure that you have some LED battery lights. Ideally, You can get them super cheap. Just make sure that you stick one or two in each room in your house. That's probably a very good idea to be doing, because the last thing you want is to be having to deal with something like this for the first time, when not only are you unprepared, but you're also in the dark. I mean, most of this is just common sense stuff. Yeah, think about, for example, if you go camping when it was very cold outside, what would you bring with you? That's basically how you need to treat the situation, because things could potentially get pretty bad. I hope it doesn't. I really hope it doesn't get bad, but it's a very real possibility. But yeah, the other thing as well, assuming that you're not prepared to just live off cold food exclusively. Obviously, especially as we're British and we drink about 14 cups of tea a day. Make sure you have a way to cook. So if you have a barbecue grill, this is a good way to cook. Although it's not exactly a very efficient way of cooking. That's the only problem with it. If you don't have one already, get yourself camp stove, fire pit, something similar. Camp stoves are a good option because they're extremely energy efficient. They're quite cheap to run, depending on the design, of course. You get different types. The most common tend to be the tiny little gas stoves that use the little tiny gas cylinder. There's nothing wrong with those. Personally, I've got a Trangia, which is an alcohol fueled stove, just because I like them. You also get rocket stoves, like wood fired ones that can run off like small dry twigs and whatnot. Yeah, just don't bother with a Hexi stove. Yes, they're very convenient, yes, they're very cheap, but the fuel is ridiculously expensive. But yeah, just try this out to make sure you're prepared. Just try it for a couple of days, shut off your heat, shut off your electricity, and just try and get through that couple of days. And yeah, you'll see what it's like and what you've missed, what you haven't prepared for, and what you have. If that's the best idea, just do a dry run of it. Just try and live a fairly normal day over a couple of days with no heat in your house, no electricity in your house, and yeah, you'll quickly realise what you've been prepared for and what you're not. But do it now, because winter is coming, and not only are we facing an economic crisis, we're in an energy crisis. It's getting worse and it's getting colder. So be prepared, because the last thing you want is to not be prepared at all, and then all your heat goes out suddenly, or your electricity goes out suddenly. You don't know what to do, you can't contact anyone, you can't get anywhere, and you die of hypothermia. You don't want that. And finally, I'd like to say, at this time, this trying time when many of us are struggling financially and the whole country is struggling with energy, think of the Ukrainians. Because so far all that's happened is our energy has got very expensive, and yes, it has been very, very hard for a lot of people. A lot of people are struggling financially, but that's only financial struggle. What we're paying with our money, the Ukrainians are paying with their blood. So keep that in mind. Hopefully this madness will be over soon. Too many good people have suffered already, but it's not looking like it's going to be over anytime soon, unfortunately. So yeah, begin preparing now, because winter is coming.